Do leadership differently. This is a research project for my work with my clients. It's about leadership innovation, and it focuses on high performers in a highly intense environment, the kind of leaders who know how to perform at peak performance, take care of their own well-being, but are also strong creative problem solvers. I coach people who are strong creative problem solvers in various fields. They work in highly intense environments and they know how to perform at a peak level. And some of them are missing something because we can't see our own selves. Different is better than better. Deconstructing the best leaders in various industries can be of tremendous value to anyone who's seeking to be a better leader themselves. In this episode, I have the privilege of interviewing Jacob Ner-David, who is a serial entrepreneur and the CEO of Vinsent. Jacob was born and raised in the United States and then later moved to Israel. In 1994, he graduated law school of Georgetown University. He is married to Chaviva, and they have 7 children. Jacob was the executive chairman and co-founder of Delta 3, which was one of the first companies in Israel to reach the $1 billion evaluation mark and become a unicorn. Since then, he has co-founded many companies, too many to list here. Just check out his LinkedIn profile, and was a managing partner in others. In 2015, he joined McKinsey, where he worked as a senior advisor for a while. Today, he is the CEO and co-founder of Vinsent, which is a blockchain platform that enables wineries and wine lovers to connect and sell and buy fine wine directly. His vast experience provides this interview with invaluable insights. I really enjoyed talking to him. Enter Jacob Ner-David. Enjoy. Okay, so if I were to ask you what your 2 or 3 top superpowers are, what would you say?
One is, I think, flow, like, or, zrima in Hebrew. But just trying to not let things become too much of a clash or get worked up too much over any specific issue, knowing that there's always going to be more stuff. And also, I think flow is the headline, but the other is, recognizing how important certain things are and not so important things are. So, so if I'd say, my family versus whether a particular business achievement or whatever, so my family would be much higher than the particular business achievement. Well, just putting things in perspective would be the, flow is the headline, and then the sub-headline is putting things in perspective.
Fantastic. Excellent. And what would be your second superpower?
Next one. I think 2 is being satisfied with what I have, which doesn't mean that you don't want to achieve more, but being satisfied with what you have is already, which is part of, obviously, from our mutual spiritual tradition, but being satisfied with what you have is already a superpower. And I see many people who seem sad and lonely because they keep chasing things and they're not satisfied with what they had.
Fantastic. And do you have a third superpower?
I think that I try to be healthy, kind of physically, and mindful about that, which also helps me, as long as it works, helps me stay, in a good place. Just on a side, it's a good thing to stay healthy even when you're not healthy. Like, so I'll give you an example. During the past year, just before, it was happening for a while, but finally was diagnosed just before, a month before Rosh Hashanah, like around Rosh Chodesh Elul. that I had this autoimmune disease, which is quite severe and rare,
Wow.
and had to be hospitalized. And I was in the hospital for the whole month before Rosh Hashanah.
Wow.
Um, but the admitting doctor at Rambam said to me, "Wow, you're the healthiest person I've ever admitted."
I love it. I love it.
So, if you already are preparing yourself physically as well, not that I wish, what I had on anyone or have on anyone, but if you start off at if you start off with a year, then you're going to be much happier, even when confronted with something.
Amazing. Fantastic. And what would you say are the dark sides of each of those superpowers?
So, if people are looking for what I call the obnoxious, never satisfied CEO or leader, CEO in a business context, which many people flock around and want such a leader, then the type of leadership that I bond with more is seen as weak or too giving or compromising, and not either not pushy enough or not strong enough or not strong enough, and there are all these kind of adjectives that can be used. I don't think you need to be the obnoxious CEO, obviously, and then I point to many successful people who have never been that and thank God are quite successful. But sometimes we have that kind of model in our head. So I think I don't agree with it, but I think the dark side, if you're using that expression, could be as seen as a weak or not as sharp or strong.
Beautiful. And what about the other superpowers? Like go with the flow. You said.
Yeah, no, I think so. And all these things, right? They're all about the superpowers that I mentioned are all about bringing balance, right? So people who are not seeking balance, right? They're seeking for example, don't tell me that you just went for a 2-hour, mountain bike ride, because those 2 hours I thought you were, boom, 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 bringing in, another whatever it is. So, the people who say, for example, they don't have time for whatever it is, can get upset when they see people making time for things that they think should not be as prioritized. So, and again, whether that's taking care of yourself physically, whether it's family, community, or just taking time for yourself. I think the flip side of the kind of superpowers that we talked about are that people who are not seeking balance, people who are looking for the workaholic 20-hour a day person, whether they're looking at it for themselves or looking at it for people that they can identify with, kind of won't find it. I mean, I literally, for example, one time was criticized. I was going to raise money for a particular startup, and I was meeting, and somebody had referred me, who had already invested in the startup. We actually never got along though, but he referred me to another investor. And that investor happened to come across me. I took a half a day off for a community related volunteer thing. And he happened to be there as well. He was already kind of more like sort of semi-retired. And then kind of word gets back to me, a couple of days later from the person who had, introduced us. He said, so-and-so said, what kind of a startup CEO would be taking off half a day to go do this, volunteer thing? How does he have time for that?
Perfect. What happened?
The guy didn't invest. And,
okay. Well, it's better that way.
Yeah, it's okay. It's cool. It's all right.
But yeah, I totally get your gist. And it's actually rare. I was in high tech for over 10 years before I went into coaching. And I've seen different types of leaders. I myself ascended the ladder in team leaders. I was never a CEO, but I've managed teams and I've learned a lot. So for me, this is also a personal learning experience that I want to share with other people as well. So with your experience, looking back at your history, what would you have done differently if you could go back and change?
So the dark side of some of this good stuff that I think is when there is a point where you are too giving or too compromising, or so looking back and looking forward, because we're all always learning, is trying to figure out, hey, maybe I should have fired that person sooner, or cut back this, or done that sooner, or taken this decision sooner. Those are the things, or come to the realization that the person who I was perhaps kind of against in a negotiation, whatever, just didn't share my 1 + 1 = 3 philosophy, and that I should have kind of cut much earlier, or been tougher in negotiation with them.
Would you have a way to tell when to be more giving and when not?
It's a good question. So I'd like to think that I've kind of learned more about it, but we always come back to these situations where I heard an expression a couple months ago, which I would credit the person I heard it from, but I don't remember who I heard it from. The expression is hire for success, not for convenience. And sometimes, including myself, or first of all myself, there's a convenience aspect where you don't fire this person because you don't have anybody to replace them, and you don't really want to go back to doing that work also. There was a reason why you hired them. And kind of that sort of loop, is always the dangerous one, right? And then we give a little more, because we give the person a third chance and a fourth chance, because we don't really want to fire them, because either we're being kind of lazy in terms of hiring somebody else, or lazy to ourselves in the sense that we don't want to do their work also. So you get stuck in a thing. So the lesson that I try to kind of take is, it's not going to get better. So you should, as soon as possible, communicate, to whoever it is. Again, it could be to yourself, but communicate that whatever the situation is, it's not working out.
Fantastic. That's actually very powerful. And a lot of people, most of the CEOs in the high tech world who have recently had the privilege of talking to and asking similar questions, it's interesting. Most of them are on the polar opposite side of what you described. For them, by nature, from the ones I've spoken with, I'm sure there are many others, it is easier to cut the ties quicker. And they feel that's their dark side, that they're too quick at doing that. And they've lost so many opportunities by acting in that manner, as opposed to taking a step back, taking a deep breath, and thinking twice.
Right.
Now, of course, they're both types in the world. And
I'm actually, I came to the realization a long time ago that there's a position I'm much better suited for, but it doesn't really exist in startup life, which is, but I really enjoy startup life. So the position I'm best suited for is more to be like the chairperson of the board, kind of giving over, advice and helping the CEO kind of guide and whatever, blah, blah, but not being not being responsible for all the execution and so on, or directly responsible. And that position doesn't really exist, in startup life. When you get to a whole different level of corporate life, which I've seen from the side, and have many friends who are in those positions, right? I have friends who are CEOs of Fortune 500 corporations. So the way, they use their board of directors is a whole different art than the startup world, which is very, very, very different. So in the startup world, there really isn't, the same those same dynamics. But by nature, I'm much more suited to that. But on the other hand, part of my nature, I also love the startup phase. So, I just kind of have to force myself to be more of the execution person, which is not necessarily my nature, and have to manage people and all that kind of stuff, which I hate doing as well.
so let me be bold here and ask you a question that I would have asked any of my clients, because I work with like high caliber people, Hollywood producers and stuff like that. Why don't you go ahead and create that position?
Because then you got to, I've been asked that before, because then you have to go, that in itself is creating a business. And I don't really, and I don't, I've taken a moment to stop and think about, do I do that and build up a practice, because there's no full-time position like that. And then so I built up like a consulting practice sort of, and I've basically made a decision. It's not what I wanted to do. There are people who have done it and do it. Just not what I wanted to do. And I actually do really enjoy the doing. It's not that I don't enjoy the doing. There's just parts of it that I don't enjoy. But I do enjoy the doing. And there's parts of it that I do well. You gotta kind of take it all, it's all a package, right?
I get it. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's I have one particular person in mind. I'm thinking about it, right? Which is one friend of mine who he's been CEO of a Fortune 500, the same Fortune 500 corporation for over 10 years now.
Wow.
And obviously this past year was extremely difficult. In the hospitality sector. And but he ended up getting there in a different route than most people would end up getting into the same position. And the thing that you've kind of that strikes you first about him is his smile and his gentleness, just the exact opposite of what you'd expect from the classic image of a Fortune 500 CEO. It's just like remarkable. And we're friends, but we're not, we don't talk every week. But if I send him a personal email, boom, I get an answer back, within a day or.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So there are people like that, right?
Of course, and those skills take you really far. Those are what we call the soft skills. Those are the real hard skills. Those are the true skills, because those are the people that really transform their community around them.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember when I was hiring for my team, I taught myself to look for those type of people. That was a more important quality for me than the specific experience. As long as I could bring them up to speed on their skill set, that didn't matter as much. Because toxic environments is a no-go.
Yeah, but we and I've talked about this for years, and maybe one day I'll kind of sit down and try and write about it or something. But we do, certainly in the West, we do sometimes idealize what I call the obnoxious CEO. And then we're surprised when other things come out, like, oh, he was also doing this and this and this, and he was also doing that. Well, yeah, what'd you think? He wasn't a nice guy.
Exactly. That's actually a very important insight that you shared there, because a lot of people don't want to see that. They turn a blind eye to that. That's something they want to ignore, because we put that personality type on a pedestal.
Yeah,
So,
the newscaster Jake Tapper in the States and CNN. So he said something at the height of the election campaign, the presidential election campaign, and he said, people are just not getting it. The folks, and again, whether you support Donald Trump, not support Donald Trump is not the point. He said, the folks that are against Donald Trump keep kind of bringing up all this like personal stuff about him and this and all that was known, right? The people who are voting for Donald Trump kind of took him as a full package.
sure.
So what they're not going to get convinced by more of that, because they knew it already. It's not that they didn't know it. They knew it already, and they're still voting for him. So come up with something else. And I find that in Israel today, not just today, for the past 2 years, obviously, we got caught up in this, low Bibi or rock low Bibi or whatever thing, which is just not interesting, right? Tell me who you are. Don't tell me that you're not that guy.
On that note, I want to share with you something that a couple of the CEOs I work with and have interviewed like yourself resonate with this, and I want to know how this lands with you, if you don't mind. There was a pivotal moment in my life when I was, I think, 16 years old. I was studying in yeshiva, and the rabbi was teaching a lesson that I believe no one else in class understood. He said as follows, just to give you some context, that we have a commandment to pray 3 times a day. And as part of prayer, there's a portion where we stand up straight, we're not allowed to move. So there was a rabbi 150 years ago, Rabbi Yisrael of Salant, who asked this theoretical question. He said, if a person is in the middle of his prayers, but he's praying in a forest, and he notices something in the corner of his eye in the river, and it is possible that what he sees there is a log floating, in which case he must ignore it and focus on his prayers. However, it is possible that what he sees floating there is a person drowning, in which case he has to stop his prayers and go save the person. His question was, is there a way to tell without moving from your spot if it's a human being or a log? And he said, yes, there is. He said, if it's going with the stream, it's a log. If it's going against the stream, it's a human being.
Right.
And I stood up there and then in class and I said, that is me. I understood exactly what he was teaching. And I said, it's what the powerful lesson he was teaching there is that every moment a person has a choice. We have constant streams fighting us in multiple directions, sometimes simultaneously. And you have a choice. Are you a human being or a log? A log is someone who goes without thinking. He just goes with not the flow you mentioned at the beginning, but he doesn't think. A person could choose to go with the flow, but that's a matter of choice.
Yeah.
Right. Now,
Also,
Um,
there's a difference between, so just to
yeah,
correct that, there's a difference between to go with the flow and sort of to experience things in the sense of flow. זאת אומרת, לזרום עם זה
beautiful.
is different. And, and by the way, the smarter thing to do, if you knew something about, if you were in that thing in the river, the smarter thing to do is not to fight the current, because that would exhaust you, but is to try and find a way to go with the current and grab something. But it's that we see kind of repeatedly, right? When you try to go too against whatever it is. But sometimes you have to.
It's a personality thing, right? One of my clients asked me, so what are the type of people you like to work with? I said, well, my ideal clients are what I call rebels. And he said, oh, you mean a warrior? I said, no, not a warrior, a rebel. He said, what's the difference? I said, there's a massive distinction between the two. A warrior is someone who becomes a warrior once he defeats his opponent. Then he could rest and he feels great. A rebel is someone who understands he may never complete his mission. He doesn't care. He is there to do his job. And,
Right.
and that's the distinction between people. Most people look to live with intention. That's great. Some people want to live in tension.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I help my clients work with. So I want to know if how that lays with you as someone who's, I'm sure struggled a little bit.
Yeah, struggle with it, but there was something I once heard from, I think he wrote about it as well, but I heard it from him directly. The late Edgar Bronfman, bless his memory, he said politics is like a symphony. Politics done right is like a symphony done right. He said, there's the conductor. Of course, Edgar wanted to be the conductor, but there's the conductor. So then there's the violin section, and he said, and then, there's the guy who, has that gong thing in the back, when you hear from him, you hear from him, but he's got a very specific role, in the symphony, and the conductor needs to know, so he said, when it doesn't work right is when the guy with the gong thing is not at all coordinated with the violinist and is not, with this one and that one and so on. And they all kind of have to know the music, right? They all have to know the music beforehand. They have to know kind of what we're talking about and what. And of course, the way, kind of Edgar played this out is, politics done right is like when I'm in the White House at a meeting, again, this is a long time ago, but when I'm in the White House in a meeting, I need to be able to say to, the president, those people protesting outside, the people with the gong, the people who are doing the gong, here's their message, da 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 da. I'm not them, I'm here in my fancy suit and I'm here in the White House and I don't play the gong, but we overlap, right? It's the same music. And he said everybody, needs each other and needs to know their place and be happy with their place. So I think, the rebel is to go back to, to connect it up to what you were saying. The rebel's not necessarily, ever going to be the Fortune 500 CEO or the conductor, but they're going to, they're going to make noise. They're going to move the conversation.
There's the type who stand up and say, they stand up to all the naysayers around them. Even the most difficult ones are the ones in their own head. But They say, no, let's do it anyhow. They're the opportunity seekers.
Yeah.
They try different things until something works. And even if it failed, so what? So you move on. Those are the type of people who make the shifts.
Right. So those, for me, what you're describing as a rebel is for me the entrepreneurial quality.
Yeah.
Um, and the entrepreneurial quality can be all consuming, or, it can be a quality that you can try to teach, and people can try to take on even within a not so entrepreneurial environment. But people who are entrepreneurs by nature, and who thrive in the sense of personal satisfaction, thrive in that environment, then that's what they're going to keep doing, and whether it be questioning, or not just questioning, but then actually doing. I don't think an entrepreneur is not someone who only questions; they actually have to do. So it's a very different type of leadership and skill set.
So now let me just ask you, what is your background? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Married to Jacob Ner-David for almost 31 years. Parent to 7 children, ranging in age from 10 to 27. So that's taken up a lot of my time for the past 30 years. Came from a family of only 2 children. Both my parents are academics. And my father was in the world of computer science, my mother English literature. So the kind of tech stuff I got more from my father, and appreciation for literature more from my mother. But both of them had rebellious streaks. And so I was raised kind of with the idea that you kind of question everything, and not necessarily that you don't have respect for tradition. And I was raised, in a traditional Jewish home. I went to yeshiva as a kid, but we were always different. we were those different people, and we were the people who were kind of not in the not living in the bubble. It was a very much smaller bubble back then anyway, but we weren't living in the bubble. And I think that kind of really has carried me forward to today. In fact, I was just thinking about this last night, particularly Yom HaShoah, that there was a particular issue that I was kind of concerned about, and I was seeking, like, this is a long time ago, back in 1990, 91, and I was seeking like a broader platform for it, and I spoke to my father about it, and I said, ideally, I'd love for this to be, on the op-ed page of the New York Times, for them to be, saying something about this. So my father said, so do something about it. Like, how do you get it? So, A.M. Rosenthal was the legendary editor of the New York Times. He was still just finished. He was in his last years as editor of the New York Times, but he had started to write a column in the op-ed page of the New York Times as well. And so I just wrote him a letter, and it was about a particular Nazi criminal who had been given safe harbor in Syria from after the Shoah, and was publicly living in Syria. It wasn't a secret. His name was Alois Brunner, and he had been a direct report of Adolf Eichmann. So I write to A.M. Rosenthal. I don't expect to hear back. People didn't use email back then. It was an actual physical letter.
That's right.
Huh?
What's that?
And a couple of days, not a couple of days, must have been like a week later, I get a letter back from A.M. Rosenthal. And he said, very interesting thing. I wasn't really familiar, with things. Can you tell me more? I write him back, I photocopy a bunch of stuff and send him back. And then he writes me back and I write him back. And we go back and forth. And then he sends me a letter and he said, okay, I'm working on something. Watch the op-ed pages. And sure enough, like a week later, he wrote a full column about it.
Wow.
And going back to my symphony allegory from Edgar Bronfman, I wasn't even the gong person, right? I was like I was in the production crew, right? My name doesn't appear, but I was just like, here, look at that. I was really able to do something.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So
tell me a little bit about your high-tech life.
So in 1994, I graduated law school, and I had had a scholarship in law school, so I didn't have any debt, which was a major gift. So I could just kind of do anything. I didn't really want to be a lawyer. I went to law school because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And a mentor of mine at the time kind of squashed me getting this position, which was like more in the political sphere. And I went to him and I said, why'd you kind of put a kibosh on that? He said, because if you end up doing that, you'll get stuck in that. And he said, you've done so much already, because I'd been involved in political activism already. Now you need to go into the business world. And I'd had a little bit of an interest in the business world. He said, technology, you're entrepreneurial by nature, you're a crazy person, and you want to live in Israel. So be a high-tech entrepreneur in Israel. I said to him, what does that mean? He said, go figure it out. But, it's taking off. Like, go do that. So the next day, I was at completely exactly how it all went down. I was at my niece's birthday party, which I didn't want to go to, but family. And somebody said to me, so what do you do? I said, oh, I'm involved in high-tech entrepreneurship. Something like that. And he said, really? I said, yeah. And, in Israel and thing. And this was in Long Island. And he said, oh, because there's this thing I'm thinking of investing in. Maybe you could, check it out for me. I said, sure. I said, how much do you charge? And I'm kind of quickly thinking, we already had one child, and, Chaviva was studying at the time. And I'm like, I had to come up with what to say. So it was like, how much do I need a month, to live on? So I just threw out a number, and he's like, oh, okay. I said, for at least 6 months, for at least, 6 month, contract and do. It's like, oh, he's like, yeah, sure, fine. And that's what got me started. And I went and checked out that company, which was 2 mad scientists in an apartment, and helped them kind of make a company.
To Israel, and that dime, you had the money to.
Yeah. And helped them kind of make a company out of it, and then helped commercialize another mad scientist idea, and then came up together with a very good friend of mine, came up with an idea of our own, which we pursued, and that was in voice over IP. But I knew enough at that point to go out and raise money and do everything you need to do. And then, we did that company, and that was a successful company, thank God.
What was
And
its name? What company was that?
Delta 3.
Delta 3.
Ended up taking that company public. Was one of the first unicorns of its day, and then just kind of kept moving forward in the kind of tech entrepreneurship world. Some things, more successful than others. So I've, now I'm the person where, 30 years ago, they said, you need a person with gray hair on your, management team or your advisory board. Now I'm the person with gray hair. So, but I don't feel that way, but I do have the gray hair.
And that's what you bring to the table.
I think there's also an, ageism that goes on in the startup world, which when this was 10 years ago, I was on Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley, which is where all the VCs are, right?
Mm.
And I was trying to raise money with a friend for something that we were going to start. And we meet with the VC, and it was easy for us to get meetings because people knew who we were. We already had some success. So but we're meeting with one particular VC, and he says, the whole thing's just too weird. I said, what's too weird? He said, it's you're talking about something that is like this, but it's going to be in Israel. And but I could tell that wasn't the whole reason he was bothered. I said, what else is bothering you? He said, also, you're old. When I was 41 or 42 at the time.
Over the hill.
I said, I'm old. He said, yeah, if you were, a 26-year-old product manager from Facebook, I'd give you a term sheet without even knowing what you wanted to do. So, there's also those kinds of, realities. And we often say that, right? You see somebody doing something, and you say, oh, aren't they, too old, to do something like that? Whatever it is, dancing that way or wearing those clothes, or, aren't they too old?
Mm.
Well, why is why is the fact that they're 62 mean that they can't wear those clothes, but if they were 22 they could? Like, no reason.
Fair point. I should start thinking of that a little more when I get dressed in the morning.
Well, but I'm sure it's somewhere there's a border there somewhere, but
but wow, that's an amazing story. Wow. Okay. It doesn't surprise me that there are people like that.
Yeah. Anyway, but I've stayed in the what I call entrepreneurial world, but kind of knowing, I don't want to say with cynicism, just with a fair amount of almost sometimes being too aware, or where people are just kind of talking gobbledygook, and at some moments, that I want to feel more grounded and not just be talking about AI for this, or machine learning for that, or whatever.
That's one of the common threads with the people I work with, that they're so involved in what they do, it becomes who they are. And at some point they wake up to this realization that they've been hiding part of their identity or their true identity, and they never really have time to live into that part of themselves. No, thank you very much for your time. This is a tremendous pleasure for me just to meet you. And once again, thank you for